Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, I want to try to see if I can answer this question as best as I humanly possibly can. To this day, even though I made so many Subtlety Rogue videos, Assassination and Outlaw, just putting out as much content, trying to split it equally for all three specs of Rogue, trying to talk about all three specs of Rogue in detail. I made guides about every single spec, and it still is a looming question for a lot of people. Hey Dalaran, which spec should I play? First of all, I don't want to be the guy to tell you which spec that you should be playing. I want you to choose the spec that you enjoy the most, which is a difficult question to answer because I don't want to be the guy to tell you, hey, play Assass, or hey, play Subtlety, hey, play Outlaw, and then have it impact your whole choice of which Rogue spec to play in Legion. But I do want to help you guys out as best as I can, and I think that I can break down each spec in terms of some of the things that a player looking to play a favorite spec of Rogue, some of the things they're looking for. I'm going to put it in a few different criterias that at least I would want to look at when I'm looking at a spec of any class. Let's say like a spec of shamans, and I'm trying to figure out which shaman spec do I really want to play. I'm going to break down Rogue in specifics that every single class can be relatable to. One of them is going to be the playstyle. The next one is going to be the role, because all these specs have a different role and a different kind of rotation and specificity that comes with this role, like what they're really good at. I'm going to talk about the general strengths and weaknesses of each spec. I am just trying to not steer you guys in a direction of a spec. I'm just trying to provide information for you to make the right decision, because like all of you, I am very passionate about World of Warcraft. I really am. I get up in the middle of the night just to play some BGs, maybe kill some skirms, and I don't even have my contacts in. I'm losing games left and right, but I'm still enjoying myself, and I want to make sure that I'm choosing the right spec for myself. Granted, I chose the spec that I'm going to play, and I'll tell you guys at the end which spec I'm going to be playing, although I don't think it should be that much of a secret. But let's get on to the video and talk about each spec in particular. If you are a fan of dealing massive amounts of sustained damage and burst damage, if you are a fan of poisons and bleeds and rotting your enemy, if you are a sadistical asshole that loves to leave your opponent dotted up, left for dead, you're not even touching them at this point and they're still rotting to their death, you might just want to play Assassination Rogue. Assassination Rogue plays a lot like what Assassination has been played since Pandaria and Draenor. It's a fairly simple, I guess, a quote-unquote simple playstyle. It does have its own quirks that you will have to learn as Assassination Rogue in order to get really good at it. It is a spec that deals massive amounts of damage. If you're a fan of great sustained damage, Assassination is your go. If you're a fan of massive amounts of burst at a fairly low cooldown, Assassination might be the spec for you. If you're simply a fan of dotting people, multi-dotting, like there's so many opportunities of how you deal damage as Assassination. You have poisons, and you have bleeds, and then you have class talents and PvP talents that allow you to customize how you dish out damage to your foe. I mean, when you look at it, either way, you are going to be sitting on them, bleeding them, dotting them, stun locking them, killing them. But the way that Blizzard allowed you to choose how you want to do it, there's just something personal about it, something unique. So the way you dish out your burst and damage might be a little bit different than what another rogue does, but you guys are both unique snowflakes and you can revel in that. One of the disadvantages of playing Assassination though is you are lacking on CC. The two big CC that you did lose, you do have Garrote, which is a small advantage, but the two CC that you did lose, I feel like that were pretty crucial for PvP. One was Gouge and the other was Blind. Now, when you're thinking about, hey, if you got a ton of damage, do I really need Gouge or do I really need Blind? And in some cases, yes, but Assassination doesn't quite feel roguelike with the loss of Blind and Gouge. At least that's how I felt, and I've heard other rogues talk to me about it before. The loss of such two simple abilities like a Gouge or Blind makes it feel almost less roguelike. But it's easy to forget about the loss of CC when you're watching the whole enemy team suffering from bleeds as your numbers go up to the top of the charts of a BG. When you're on that streak where you're just dealing insane amounts of damage left and right, bleeding up your foes, throwing up your poisons, it is definitely one of those feelings where you can tell just how powerful you are and how little everybody else is around you. It's really like a power grab kind of like playstyle. I guess is the best way I can put it. What I want to say is Assassination is a lot of fun. It deals tons of damage, but besides dealing damage, you kind of are a one-trick pony because you are kind of lacking those rogue-based CCs that you would use to score trinket and trade cooldowns and make some plays. The next rogue spec on the table is Subtlety, and if you enjoy high amount of mobility for rogue, like ridiculous amount of mobility, you might want to consider playing Subtlety. If you ever dreamed of being a ninja, running through the rooftops, and if you enjoy massive amounts of burst while having fair amount CC, while being able to dish out sustained damage, you might want to play Subtlety. Subtlety is one of the specs that's kind of like a little bit of mix of both worlds. It's a kind of a fair middle ground between what an Assassination rogue is and what an Outlaw rogue is, and I'll talk about that when I talk about the negatives, but just take that into consideration. Subtlety deals insane amounts of damage if you build yourself for so, but Subtlety can also deal insane amounts of sustained damage if you build yourself that way. For Subtlety, for the most part, you kind of have to build yourself for either damage over time and being able to put pressure on your enemy over a period of time, or to put pressure on your enemy early on and burst them down in an opener. So that's one of the fun things about Subtlety, is the fact that you can still play around with those playstyles and you can still be the bursty opener Subtlety if you want to. And you'll actually be rewarded for sticking in stealth for as long as you can and then coming out on your foe as soon as you get your cooldowns available. This spec is all about hit and run playstyles, and on top of it having a ton of mobility, it makes it so difficult to catch Subtlety. This spec is literally unkiteable. Hunters, mages, any class that has any slows will just simply not be able to catch Subtlety ever. And that's just one of the coolest things about the spec. It's just how strong it is in terms of mobility, how crazy it is, just how insane the spec is altogether. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about Subtlety. Now, the only negative I guess I can come up with Subtlety is it's not quite an Assassination rogue, but it's not quite an Outlaw rogue. Subtlety has a pretty fair toolkit in terms of CC. You have Cheap Shot, which you have pretty easy access to since you have Shadow Dance, and they put Shadow Dance in charges, so it's much easier to access Shadow Dance whenever you need it without having to waste the full duration of 10 seconds of 1 minute cooldown. You have a Blind and you have a Kidney, which you can use on a secondary target because you have your Cheap Shot for the main lineups. So the spec has a fair amount of CC, but definitely not as much CC as an Outlaw rogue. Literally, Outlaw rogue controls whoever it wants to go on or whoever it tries to control. So you can cleave targets while controlling the healer and just not letting him play whatsoever, but I'll get into that in Outlaw in a little bit. Assassination, on the other hand, has massive sustain and burst. You don't really have to choose which one you want, but you can basically adjust your playstyle depending on whether you like bleeds or whether you like poisons. Nonetheless, it does not take away from the fact that you deal massive sustain and does not take away from the fact that you're dealing burst damage. Subtlety, in terms of building yourself for damage, you kind of got to decide whether you want to be more sustain Subtlety and have more access to Shadow Dances and more energy regen, or do you want to be kind of like an all-in rogue where you're building up a bunch of combo points, stun locking your target, and then dropping a fat DFA onto them. So it's a bit of a preference point at that point, but Subtlety is still a very viable decision, very viable rogue spec. It's just kind of like a fair middle ground, and some people like polarized versions of each spec. Like for example, I enjoy when a spec just has a specific role and specific idea and specific goal behind it. Now, let's talk a little bit about Outlaw. When you're thinking of Outlaw, I like to think of Jack Sparrow. I think he embodies Outlaw Rogue fairly well in terms of its whole playstyle. For the longest time, I thought Outlaw Rogue would end up being something so silly, a lot like McCree from Overwatch. And I was thinking, oh, hey, I'm just gonna be a cowboy running around going yee-haw with a lasso and whatever. And I thought it would be silly because that's the first thing I thought of Outlaw. And then they told me it would be a pirate-based spec. And I thought, okay, that could be cool. And then I got to play it, and holy crap, it's cool. It basically plays a lot like what a combat rogue would, but Outlaw has a lot of CC. If you're the kind of person that likes sustained damage, like being in combat and like manipulating combat by controlling it like a mage would, but you want to do it from a melee perspective, I feel like Outlaw Rogue would be the spec for you. You have so much CC. You have a Gouge, which you can make a free Gouge, no energy and generates a combo point. You have Blind, you have Sap, Cheap Shot, you have a range Kidney Shot, which actually is called Between the Eyes. It's a range Kidney Shot. It is kind of insane. And you also have massive amounts of cooldown reduction, so you can actually get cooldown reduction on all of your CC with a mechanic of Roll the Bones, which has a little bit of RNG to it. But if you feel like, you know, going R and playing a pirate, but then you spamming saber slashes back to back, you are a kind of spec that will be dealing a lot of sustained damage while controlling your foes, but you will still have pretty sustainable burst if you choose to build yourself in terms of burst, although you can do a little bit more sustainability and a little bit more of team play if you want to. But all of you will discover this once you get to max level and once you level up your rogue to level 110 and try out all your talents and all your PvP talents and then check out your artifact tree. In terms of damage and playstyle, Outlaw Rogue is a pretty simple playstyle in terms of you basically spam one button. You're not really as complex with damage as Assassination Rogue, but you're not quite flexible like a Subtlety Rogue in terms of how you want to play. You basically will just be master of sustained damage, and that is what you are stuck to, I guess. And I don't want to make it sound like stuck as in like in a bad way stuck, but like that's really where most of your damage will kind of drop off at. You will have decent amount of damage, and that's really will be most of your potential is just plain sustain. So then you kind of got to figure out how to use CC in order to line up for it. But there's been moments, for example, like when I'm trying to really burst down some healer in a BG, not on the beta, on the live servers on pre-patch, and simply because I don't have that much burst, I'm not really putting too much of a dent on the healer. There's definitely moments when you have your cooldowns available and holy crap, it's the holy grail of damage. But then for the rest of the time, it's a pretty stable playstyle with a lot of focus on CC. So I guess the only disadvantage of it would be you don't have immediate damage at all times, except when you have your cooldowns available. As a Subtlety Rogue, you can build yourself for more immediate damage. As Assassination, you can literally burst whenever the hell you want to. And as an Outlaw, you have to build yourself to allow yourself like every 2 minutes or every 3 minutes some cooldowns in order to be able to pop some real burst into your enemy and then score a kill. So these are the specs and that's how they play, and hopefully this video made some sense to you guys. Hopefully this is something you can use in order to decide which spec you really want to play. First of all, I want to say all 3 specs are viable, and I feel like all 3 specs of Rogue are going to see play in arenas and rated battlegrounds, because Assassination deals too much damage, Subtlety is the best of the worlds, and in the past we've seen rogues be able to deal basically 0 damage, like for example Subtlety in terms of first season of Warlords, where Subtlety dealt like no damage, but if you still have massive amounts of CC, then you will still see play, and that's why Outlaw will be viable as well. All 3 specs are great, and all 3 specs can burst. So if you're looking at a spec like you're thinking, oh, Outlaw never bursts or Subtlety never bursts, they do have burst. It's just some specs are more dedicated towards the burst. They have a shorter cooldown and just a more powerful burst. But all the 3 specs can burst someone down, and they're all viable, and they're just different in their particular ways, in playstyle, in role, and in feeling, I guess is the best way to describe it. It definitely does feel different, and I primarily chose to play Outlaw mainly because of how it feels. It feels basically like I'm playing a combat rogue, which is something I'm very akin to, but the feeling of the CC while kind of having sustained damage, now that's where it's at. It's the comfortable norm that I'm really used to. I tried Assassination and it's a lot of damage and it's just not my playstyle. Subtlety is a very close second. It is so much fun, but it just doesn't have a fine touch of an Outlaw, and that is the reason why I'm going Outlaw. So hopefully if this video was helpful for you guys, let me know. If this video was helpful, please tell me which spec you are considering, and if you had a spec in mind before I even made the video, feel free to throw it in the comments below and let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one because I got a lot more Legion videos to make. Thank you guys for watching.